The stars had always called to humanity. For centuries, they looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. By the year 2347, they had found their answer. They were not alone, and the universe was not friendly. The Zervani Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had conquered 3,000 star systems. They had crushed 400 species under their rule. Their warships were massive, their weapons were powerful, and their armies were endless. No one had ever defeated them. No one had ever tried. When 47 Zervani warships appeared in Earth's orbit on a cold morning in March, the people of Earth felt true fear for the first time in generations. The ships were enormous. Each one was larger than a city. They blocked out the sun and cast shadows over entire continents. High Prelate Zorvac commanded the fleet. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and black eyes that showed no emotion. He had conquered dozens of worlds. To him, Earth was just another primitive planet, filled with primitive creatures who would soon learn their place. His transmission reached every screen on Earth at the same moment. His voice was cold and mechanical, as a translator turned his words into human languages. "People of Earth," he said, "the Zervani Empire claims your world. You will provide tribute, 30% of your minerals, 20% of your food, 10,000 of your people each year for labor. In return, we will allow you to live. You have one rotation of your planet to accept. Refuse, and we will destroy you." The transmission ended. Silence fell across the world. In Geneva, the United Earth Council gathered within hours. Leaders from every nation sat around a massive table, their faces pale with fear. Military commanders showed data on screens. The Zervani weapons could burn whole continents. Their shields could stop any attack. Humanity's entire fleet of 200 ships was built for exploration, not war. President Laura Mitchell sat at the head of the table. She was 62 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes. She had served in the Navy for 20 years before entering politics. She had faced storms and pirates and hostile nations, but she had never faced anything like this. "What are our options?" she asked. General Victor Reyes stood up. He was a large man with a scarred face and tired eyes. "Madam President, we have no options. Our weapons cannot hurt their ships. Their weapons can destroy us in hours. If we fight, we die. All of us." "And if we submit?" Laura asked. A diplomat named Margaret Cole spoke up. "Other species have submitted. They survive. Their populations are reduced, their resources are taken. They live as slaves, essentially. But they live." The room fell silent. Laura looked at the faces around her. She saw fear. She saw doubt. She saw people ready to give up everything to survive. "How many species have refused?" she asked quietly. Her young aide, Kevin Park, checked his tablet. 14 species have refused tribute in the history of the Empire, Madam President." "And what happened to them?" Kevin swallowed hard. Extinction. All 14 were completely destroyed. The Zervani left no survivors. Laura nodded slowly. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was dark with alien ships. She could see people in the streets below, looking up with terror in their eyes. She thought about her daughter, who was pregnant with Laura's first grandchild. She thought about the billions of people counting on her to make the right choice. She thought about what it meant to be human. Humanity had always fought. They had fought each other for thousands of years over land and resources and ideas. They had nearly destroyed themselves more than once. But they had also built great things. They had created art and music and science. They had reached the stars not because it was easy, but because it was hard. And they had never, in all their history, surrendered without a fight. Laura turned back to the council. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "I will not be the leader who handed humanity to slavers," she said. "I will not tell my grandchildren that we gave up our freedom because we were afraid. The Zervani think we are weak. They think we will break. They think we are just another primitive species to be conquered. She paused and looked at each face in the room. Let us show them what humans are made of. General Reyes stood up quickly. Madam President, with respect, this is suicide. We cannot win this war. Maybe not, Laura said, but we can make them bleed. We can show the galaxy that humanity does not kneel. And maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to survive. She sat back down and folded her hands on the table. Draft our response. Tell the Zervani Empire that Earth declines their offer of submission. Tell them that if they want our world, they will have to take it from our cold, dead hands. The room erupted in arguments. Some shouted about protecting their families. Others demanded negotiation. But slowly, one by one, the voices died down. The leaders looked at each other, and something changed in their eyes. For 300 years, humanity had been united under one government. They had set aside their old hatreds and worked together to reach the stars. Now, they remembered why they had done it. They remembered that they were one species, one people, one family. The vote was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Humanity would fight. The response was transmitted to the Zervani fleet 1 hour before the deadline. Kevin Park read it aloud as it was sent. To the Zervani Empire, the people of Earth reject your demands. We will not pay tribute. We will not provide slaves. We will not surrender our freedom. If you want war, you will have it, and you will learn that humanity does not break easily. High Prelate Zorvok received the message on his flagship. He read it twice, certain there was some mistake. In 12,000 years, no species had ever declared war on the Empire. The idea was so absurd that he almost laughed. Almost. He turned to his officers and gave his orders. The subjugation of Earth would begin immediately. He expected it to take 3 days, 4 at most. He had no idea what was coming. On Earth, as the alien fleet began to move, Laura Mitchell spoke to her planet one final time that night. Tomorrow we go to war against an enemy that has never been defeated. The odds are against us. The smart choice would be to surrender. But we are not making the smart choice. We are making the human choice. We are fighting for our children and their children. We are fighting for the right to live free. And whatever happens, we will face it together. She paused and looked directly into the camera. They wanted tribute. We are giving them war. Let history remember that when the darkness came, humanity stood up and said no. The news of humanity's defiance spread across Earth like fire. Some people panicked. They ran to stores and bought everything they could carry. They hid in basements and bunkers. They prayed to every god they knew. But something else happened too. Something the Zervani had never seen before. People started to fight back. Recruitment centers that normally processed a few hundred volunteers each month were suddenly flooded with millions. Old soldiers who had retired decades ago showed up at military bases, ready to serve again. Young people who had never held a weapon demanded to be trained. Factories that made cars and computers switched to making weapons and ships. Scientists who had studied stars and planets now studied how to destroy alien warships. The whole planet became a war machine in a matter of days. Admiral Patricia Cole took command of the United Earth Fleet. She was 55 years old, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her entire life in space, first as a pilot, then as a captain, and finally as an admiral. She knew every ship in the fleet personally. She knew their strengths and their weaknesses. And she knew they were not enough. The United Earth Fleet had 200 ships. Most of them were exploration vessels and cargo haulers. They had basic weapons for defense against pirates, but nothing that could scratch a Zervani warship. The enemy had 47 capital ships, each one capable of destroying a planet. Patricia gathered her officers aboard the carrier Defiance. The ship was old, but reliable, and it had become the heart of humanity's defense. She stood before a holographic display that showed the positions of both fleets. "We cannot beat them in a straight fight," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "Their shields can stop anything we throw at them. Their weapons can cut through our hulls like paper. If we fight by their rules, we die." Commander Diego Fuentes spoke up. He was young and eager, with dark skin and a quick smile that had disappeared since the aliens arrived. "Then we change the rules." Patricia nodded. "Exactly. The Zervani have won every war for 12,000 years. They have never faced a real challenge. They follow their doctrine like a religion. They advance in standard formations. They attack in standard patterns. They expect standard resistance." She pointed at the holographic display. "But we are not going to give them standard resistance. We are going to give them chaos." For the next week, while the Zervani fleet slowly advanced toward Earth, Patricia and her officers developed a plan. It was desperate and dangerous and probably insane, but it was the only chance they had. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, a different kind of weapon was being built. Henry Castillo had spent his whole life studying things that most people could not understand. Quantum physics, dark energy, the strange forces that held the universe together. He was brilliant and awkward, with messy hair and glasses that were always dirty. He had never expected his research to have military uses, but war had a way of changing things. The Zervani shields worked by creating a field of energy that stopped all incoming attacks. Henry had studied the data from previous encounters and found something interesting. The shields operated on a specific quantum frequency. If he could disrupt that frequency, even for a few seconds, the shields would fail. The problem was that the technology to do this did not exist. So Henry and his team had to invent it. They worked without sleep for days. They made mistakes and started over. They argued and shouted, and sometimes cried. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and the pressure was enormous. Admiral Cole called every few hours. "How long until you have something that works?" Henry always gave the same answer. "We are working as fast as we can. Work faster." On the streets of Earth's cities, life continued in strange ways. Schools stayed open because parents needed somewhere safe to send their children. Shops stayed open because people still needed to eat. But everything felt different. There was a tension in the air, a feeling that the world had changed forever. People who had been enemies became friends. Old arguments were forgotten. Borders that had divided nations for centuries seemed meaningless now. There was only one border that mattered anymore, the line between Earth and the aliens who wanted to enslave them. Laura Mitchell traveled across the planet, visiting factories and military bases and hospitals. She shook hands with soldiers and workers. She thanked them for their courage. She promised them that their sacrifice would mean something. In private, she worried constantly. She could not sleep. She could not eat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the alien ships hanging in the sky like a death sentence. Her husband, Richard, found her one night standing alone on a balcony, looking up at the stars. "Do you think we can win?" he asked softly. Laura was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know," she admitted, "but I know we have to try. I know that surrender is not living, and I know that whatever happens, I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees." Richard took her hand. "Then we fight together." 3 days before the Zervani fleet reached Earth, Admiral Cole finalized her plan. It was called Operation Titan's Shadow, and it would use Saturn's largest moon to hide the fleet until the perfect moment to strike. She gathered her captains for one final briefing. These were men and women who had trained their whole lives for peace. Now they were going to war against an enemy that had never lost. "Some of you will not come back," Patricia said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. I wish I could promise you victory. I cannot. What I can promise is that your sacrifice will matter. We are going to hit them harder than anyone has ever hit them before. We are going to show the galaxy that humanity is not prey." She paused and looked at each face in the room. "They think we are primitive. They think we are weak. They think this will be easy. Let us teach them otherwise." The fleet departed Earth that night. 200 ships, carrying the hopes of 8 billion people, flew toward Saturn and the battle that would decide humanity's fate. Behind them, Henry Castillo finally made a breakthrough. It could bring down Zervani shields for almost 30 seconds. He had 7 devices ready. 7 chances to change the course of history. He transmitted the news to Admiral Cole just as her fleet reached Titan's shadow. Her response was short. "Get them to us, whatever it takes." The fate of humanity now rested on a desperate gamble, a handful of untested weapons, and a species that had never learned how to give up. The Zervani Empire was about to learn why that made humanity dangerous. Saturn hung in the darkness like a golden jewel. Its rings glittered with ice and rock, and behind its largest moon, Titan, 200 human ships waited in silence. Admiral Patricia Cole stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the tactical display. The Zervani fleet was approaching. High Prelate Zorvak had divided his forces, sending 30 ships toward Earth, while keeping 17 in reserve. It was standard Zervani doctrine. It was also exactly what Patricia had been hoping for. "All ships maintain radio silence," she ordered. "No active sensors. We are ghosts until I give the word." The human fleet was hidden behind Titan's bulk. The moon's mass blocked their signals. To the Zervani sensors, there was nothing there but rock and ice. Patricia had studied the Zervani for weeks. She had read every report, watched every recording, analyzed every battle they had ever fought. And she had found their weakness. They were arrogant. 12,000 years of easy victories had made them careless. They assumed every battle would be the same. They followed their formations like machines. They never expected surprises, because no one had ever surprised them. Until now. The 30 Zervani ships passed Saturn without slowing down. Their destination was Earth. Their mission was extermination. They did not bother to scan the moon closely. Why would they? No primitive species had ever set a trap for the Empire. Patricia watched them pass. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was calm. "Wait for it," she said. "Wait." The Zervani fleet moved past Titan. Their backs were now turned to the hidden human ships. "Now," Patricia said, "all ships, attack." 200 human vessels burst from behind the moon like a swarm of angry hornets. They accelerated at maximum speed, closing the distance before the Zervani could react. The first wave was not made of warships. It was made of mining vessels filled with nuclear explosives. These ships had no crews. They were controlled remotely. Their only purpose was to ram into the enemy and explode. The Zervani shields were designed to stop weapons fire. They could deflect plasma bolts and missiles and lasers, but they had never been tested against millions of tons of metal moving at incredible speed. The first mining ship hit a Zervani cruiser. The impact was catastrophic. The shield flickered and failed. The nuclear payload detonated inside the ship's hull. The cruiser broke apart in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness of space. 3 more Zervani ships fell the same way. The Empire had just lost more vessels in 10 seconds than they had lost in the previous 1,000 years. High Prelate Zorvak received the news on his flagship. For a moment, he did not believe it. Primitive humans had destroyed 4 of his ships? It was impossible. But the explosions were real. The debris was real. And the human fleet was still coming. "Return fire," Zorvak ordered. "Destroy them all." The The Zervani ships turned their weapons on the human fleet. Plasma cannons that could melt mountains began to fire. Human vessels exploded by the dozens. The space between the fleets filled with fire and death. But the humans did not stop. They flew directly into the Zervani formation, getting so close that the massive alien ships could not fire without hitting each other. Commander Diego Fuentes led a squadron of 40 fighters on a special mission. Their target was the flagship's communication array. If they could blind Zorvac, the Zervani fleet would fall into confusion. "Stay tight," Diego told his pilots. "We have one chance at this. Make it count." Defensive guns tracked them and opened fire. Ships exploded around Diego. He saw friends die in flashes of light. But he kept flying. 20 fighters left. Then 15. Then 10. Diego's ship took a hit that killed his co-pilot and destroyed half his controls. Smoke filled the cockpit. Warning alarms screamed. But he could see the communication array ahead, a massive structure of metal and crystal. "For Earth," he whispered, and fired everything he had. His missiles struck true. The communication array exploded. The flagship went dark and silent. Diego's ship was hit again and again. He felt the heat as his cockpit began to burn. But he was smiling as darkness took him. He had done his job. 6 pilots survived the run. 6 out of 40. But they had given Admiral Cole the opening she needed. Without communications, the Zervani captains could not coordinate. They began to make individual decisions. Others tried to regroup. A few actually retreated. The perfect formation that had conquered a galaxy fell apart in minutes. Patricia Cole saw her chance and took it. She ordered her remaining ships to target a single Zervani vessel at a time. "Concentrate all fire on one enemy until it falls, then move to the next." 5 more Zervani ships were destroyed before Zorvac restored communications. By then, the battle had become chaos. Human ships wove between the alien giants, firing at close range, sacrificing themselves to take down enemies 10 times their size. Patricia knew they could not win. She had always known. But she also knew they had already achieved something incredible. They had hurt the Empire. They had shown the galaxy that the Zervani could bleed. "All ships, begin retreat," she ordered. "Fall back to Earth. We have done what we needed to do." The surviving human ships turned and ran. The Zervani pursued, still firing, still killing. Patricia's own ship, the Defiance, took a direct hit that breached the hull. She felt the explosion throw her across the bridge. As she lay dying, she transmitted one final message to Earth. "We hurt them. We made them pay. Now finish what we started." The Defiance broke apart. Admiral Patricia Cole died with her ship, along with 3,000 crew members who had volunteered to fight. Of 200 human ships, only 17 made it back to Earth. But of 47 Zervani vessels, only 38 remained. The Battle of Titan's Shadow was over. Humanity had lost, but they had also won something far more important than a single battle. They had proven that the Empire was not invincible. And across the galaxy, on 100 conquered worlds, people began to wonder, if the humans could hurt the Zervani, maybe they could too. High Prelate Zorvac stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the blue planet before him. Earth, home of the primitives who had dared to defy his empire. Home of the creatures who had killed 9 of his ships and thousands of his soldiers. He had come to subjugate them. Now he would exterminate them. "Begin the bombardment," he ordered. "Leave nothing alive." 38 Zervani warships opened fire on Earth. Plasma rained from the sky like the anger of gods. The first target was Buenos Aires. 8 million people lived there. In 5 minutes, there was nothing left but ash and melted stone. Then Mumbai fell. Then Sydney. Then Cairo. The people of Earth watched in horror as their cities burned. They could do nothing to stop it. Their orbital defenses fired desperately at the alien ships, but the shields held. Missiles and lasers and everything humanity had built over centuries meant nothing against the power of the Empire. In the bunker beneath Geneva, President Laura Mitchell watched the destruction on dozens of screens. Each screen showed a different city dying. Each flash of light meant millions of people gone forever. "How many?" she asked, her voice hollow. Kevin Park checked his tablet with shaking hands. 23 million confirmed dead, Madam President. The number is rising every minute. Laura closed her eyes. 23 million. And the bombardment had only been going for 2 hours. General Victor Reyes approached her. His face was gray with exhaustion and grief. "We have to evacuate you, Madam President, if they target Geneva." "I am not leaving," Laura said. "If humanity dies today, I will die with them." Then her communication device buzzed. It was a message from the Rocky Mountains, from Dr. Barra. "Henry Castillo." Laura answered immediately. "Tell me you have something." Henry's face appeared on the screen. He looked terrible. He had not slept in days. His eyes were red, and his hands were shaking. But he was smiling. "It works," he said. "The quantum disruptor works. We tested it on captured Zervani technology. One hit, and their shields go down for almost 30 seconds. "How many do you have?" 7. I have 7 devices ready. 7 weapons against 38 warships. The math was impossible, but it was better than nothing. "Get them to orbit," Laura ordered. "Whatever it takes." The remaining human ships were gathered at a hidden base on the dark side of the moon. 17 vessels, most of them damaged, crewed by exhausted survivors of the Battle of Titan's Shadow. Commander Nathan Price was now the highest-ranking officer alive. Nathan was 34 years old. He had joined the fleet to explore the stars, not to fight wars. But the war had found him anyway, and now the fate of his species rested on his shoulders. He received the quantum disruptors 12 hours after the bombardment began. By then, 60 million people were dead on Earth. The Zervani were being thorough. They were burning everything. Nathan gathered his crews for one final briefing. They met in the cargo bay of his ship, the Armstrong. There were barely 500 people left from the entire United Earth fleet. "You all know why we are here," Nathan said. "The enemy is killing our planet, our families, our friends. Everything we have ever loved is burning down there." He paused and looked at their faces. They were scared. They were tired. But they were also angry. "We have 7 weapons that can bring down their shields. 7 chances to hurt them. Our target is the flagship. If we can kill High Prelate Zorvok, their command structure collapses. The Zervani have always been told what to do. They've never had to think for themselves. Without their leader, they will hesitate. They will make mistakes, and that might be enough for Earth to survive." A young pilot named Christina Wells raised her hand. "Sir, what are our chances of success?" Nathan smiled sadly. "Honestly, very small. Most of us will not come back. But if we do not try, everyone on Earth dies anyway. At least this way, we go down fighting." He looked around the room one more time. "I am not going to order anyone to come with me. This is a volunteer mission. If you want to stay behind, no one will judge you." No one moved. No one left. Then let us show them what humanity is made of. The 17 human ships launched toward Earth. The Zervani detected them immediately and sent fighters to intercept. Battles erupted across the void. Human vessels exploded, but they kept coming. Nathan flew the Armstrong directly at the Zervani flagship. It was the largest ship in the fleet, bristling with weapons. Plasma fire tore holes in his hull. He lost engines. He lost crew members. He lost friends. But he did not stop. "Disruptor charged and ready," his weapons officer reported. "Fire," Nathan ordered. The quantum disruptor released a pulse of energy that no one had ever seen before. It hit the flagship's shields, and something incredible happened. The energy field that had protected Zervani ships for 12,000 years flickered and died. For 30 seconds, the flagship was naked and vulnerable. "All ships," Nathan screamed into his communicator. "Fire everything, now." 3 human vessels were close enough to respond. They emptied their weapons into the flagship's exposed hull. Missiles and plasma and kinetic rounds tore through metal and flesh. The flagship's reactor core was hit. The explosion was visible from Earth. High Prelate Zorvok died in fire and silence. He never understood how primitive creatures had defeated him. He never understood that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or numbers. It was their refusal to give up. The death of the flagship threw the Zervani fleet into chaos. Some ships continued the bombardment. Others stopped firing and tried to contact superiors who no longer existed. A few began to retreat toward deep space. On Earth, the rain of fire slowed. Then it stopped. Nathan Price did not survive to see it. The Armstrong was destroyed moments after the flagship fell. But he died knowing he had saved his world. In Geneva, Laura Mitchell watched the Zervani fleet break apart. She fell to her knees and wept. For the dead, for the living, for the impossible thing humanity had just accomplished. The bombardment had killed 63 million people. Dozens of cities were gone forever. The scars would never fully heal. But Earth had survived. Humanity had survived. And the galaxy would never be the same. The fires burned for weeks. Smoke filled the skies of Earth, blocking out the sun and turning day into twilight. Radiation poisoned the ground where cities had once stood. The survivors dug through rubble, searching for the living and burying the dead. 63 million people were gone. Buenos Aires, Mumbai, Sydney, Cairo, and a dozen other great cities existed only in memory. The world economy had collapsed. Governments struggled to maintain order. Some people wondered if humanity had truly won, or if the Zervani had simply left them to die slowly. But humans had never been good at dying slowly. President Laura Mitchell stood in the ruins of what had once been the United Nations building in New York. The structure was half collapsed, its walls blackened by fire. But workers were already clearing debris. Engineers were making plans. Humanity was rebuilding. "We will not forget what we lost," Laura said to the cameras that broadcast her words across the planet. "We will carry this grief forever, but we will also carry something else. Pride in what we accomplished. Pride in the heroes who gave their lives. Pride in being human." She paused and looked at the workers behind her, carrying stones and metal, building something new from the ashes. The Zervani thought we were weak. They thought we would break. They were wrong. We bent, but we did not break. And now we stand again, stronger than before, united in ways we never imagined, ready to face whatever comes next. The first year after the war was the hardest. Food was scarce. Medicine was scarcer. Refugees filled every remaining city. People lived in tents and shelters, sharing what little they had with strangers who had become family. But slowly, painfully, things began to improve. Factories restarted. Farms were replanted. Schools reopened. Children who had known nothing but war began to learn about peace. And in the shipyards of Earth's orbit, something new was being built. Dr. Henry Castillo led the research effort. The quantum disruptor technology that had saved Earth was being refined and improved. New weapons were designed. New shields were created. New ships were constructed, bigger and stronger than anything humanity had built before. "We were lucky," Henry told Laura during one of his briefings. "Lucky that the disruptors worked. Lucky that we hit the flagship. We cannot depend on luck again. Next time, we need to be ready. Will there be a next time? Laura asked. Henry nodded grimly. The Zervani Empire is wounded, but not dead. They still control thousands of worlds. Sooner or later, they will want revenge. Laura accepted this truth. She had accepted many hard truths in the past year. Then we prepare. And when they come, we show them that Earth is no longer prey. The news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Traders and travelers carried stories of the primitive species that had defeated a Zervani fleet. At first, no one believed them. It had to be exaggeration. It had to be lies. But the evidence was impossible to ignore. 9 Zervani warships destroyed. A high prelate killed. The most powerful empire in the galaxy, humiliated by creatures it had dismissed as savages. On conquered worlds throughout the galaxy, people began to whisper. If the humans could hurt the Zervani, maybe they could too. Maybe the Empire was not invincible after all. The first rebellion started 3 months after the Battle of Earth. A species called the Vorath, who had been slaves for 2,000 years, rose up against their masters. They were crushed within weeks, but their example inspired others. Then the Droth. Then 7 more species in rapid succession. The Zervani found themselves fighting on dozens of fronts. Their vast empire, which had seemed eternal, began to crack. 5 years after the war, Earth received its first alien visitors, who came in peace. A delegation from the Free Systems Coalition, an alliance of species that had broken away from the Empire, arrived to propose a partnership. Grace Palmer was chosen to serve as humanity's ambassador. She was young, only 32, but she had lost her entire family in the bombardment. She had every reason to hate aliens. Instead, she chose to build bridges. We did not ask to be the spark that lit this fire, Grace told the delegation. We were simply trying to survive, but if our struggle has given hope to others, then we have a responsibility to honor that hope. We will stand with any species that fights for freedom. The coalition grew. Human engineers helped build ships for rebel fleets. Human soldiers trained resistance fighters. Human scientists shared technology that evened the odds against the Empire. And slowly, the balance of power in the galaxy began to shift. 20 years after the war, the Zervani Empire signed a peace treaty. They had lost half their territory. Their military was broken. Their reputation was destroyed. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years had been brought to its knees by a species that had been among the stars for only a few centuries. Laura Mitchell did not live to see the treaty signed. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 87, surrounded by her family. Her last words were simple: "We did it." The memorial station that orbited Earth bore the names of everyone who had died in the war. 63 million civilians, 20,000 soldiers. Every name was inscribed in metal that would last forever, circling the planet they had died to protect. At the center of the station, in a chamber of black stone and white light, stood a simple monument. It had no images, no decorations, just words carved in every known language of the galaxy. They demanded tribute. We gave them war. They expected submission. We gave them defiance. They thought we would break. We stood. And when the fire finally faded, humanity remained. Not because we were the strongest, not because we were the smartest, but because we refused to be anything less than free. Grace Palmer visited the memorial every year on the anniversary of the war. She was old now, her hair white and her movements slow, but her eyes were still sharp, and her voice was still strong. People ask me what made humanity special, she told a group of young diplomats who had come to pay their respects. Why we survived when so many others fell. I think about that question often. She looked out the window at Earth below, blue and green and alive. I think the answer is simple. We are stubborn. We do not know how to quit. When the universe tells us something is impossible, we do it anyway. When the darkness comes, we light candles. When empires demand our surrender, we spit in their faces and dare them to do their worst. She smiled, and for a moment, she looked young again. The Zervani made one mistake. They thought fear would make us weak. They did not understand that fear makes us dangerous, and now the galaxy knows what we have always known. She turned back to the young diplomats and spoke the words that had become humanity's motto in the stars. Humanity does not kneel. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, free people looked up at the stars and knew those words were true.